Good evening. As stated, I am Melissa Miller. I'm the Director of Safety and Student Services for the Los Alamitos Unified School District. Communicated to us by many parents that they weren't even aware that anyone was considering getting rid of the bike lane, and they were upset that they heard about it from the district and not from their own community. It appears to us that more communication is necessary within the community of Rossmoor. Nonetheless, as you are aware, we wanted to provide information that could be useful to RCSD. Consequently, we did conduct a brief survey last week with all of our families who go to and from school in Rossmoor. Within the first 12 hours, we had 700 responses, and 98% of the Rossmoor residents who answered the survey and wanted the bike lane to remain on Foster Road, which is a very strong data from the residents you represent, indicating that they are in favor of keeping the bike lane on Foster Road as is. Once again, I just want to say one more time that 98% of Rossmoor residents with children in our schools strongly support keeping the bike lane on Foster Road. There was a total of 837 residents that responded to the survey, of which 695 were Rossmoor residents, which is about 83%. Of the 837 residents that responded, 64% have a child that uses or will use the bike lane to get to school, and 91% are in favor of keeping the bike lane on Foster. On the survey results at the very bottom, if you pay attention to the very bottom paragraph, it does say that when just Rossmoor residents were pulled from the data, there were 683 respondents that wanted the bike lane to remain on Foster Road, which is 98% in favor of the bike lane, and 12 respondents didn't want the bike lane to remain on Foster Road, which is 2% in favor of no bike lane. Based on the data that I've just shared, it is very clear that Rossmoor residents, who are also parents in our schools, are strongly in favor of the bike lane remaining on Foster Road.
I'm impressed with a gross number of responses, and this is far more than what we had than what we've been presented by the county a year ago. That can't be argued.
I feel that certainly you can have a bike lane dedicated route with a line on the side of a road, but if you have cars parked in it, I think it defeats the purpose of having a bike lane. So I think my opinion is if you do away with the parking restriction, you pretty much do away with the bike lane itself. You can still have a route to get to school, just like a route on any one of our streets, but the parking restriction is very important in having this dedicated bike lane.
Basically, the remainder of the cars, and I think there's 8 or 9 here, are specific to the bike route resolution. Dr. Robanis, you've been very vocal, and I'm going to let you decide here. Do you want to be the first, or do you want to be the last? Or do you want me to put you in the middle? Everyone gets a vote?
Not at all.
Okay.
Start with Happy Pi Day, and I hope some of the students that are going to be speaking tonight will speak to you about Pi Day. Those of you who have had elementary age students know. Thank you for putting the bike lane on your agenda and making the Rossmoor Homeowners Association proposal to remove the parking restrictions public. I want to speak to your use it or lose it resolution. I'm going to call it that. I think you said that very candidly, Director Maynard, that you'll be voting on this evening. Over the last several months, I've been listening to you and attending your meetings, and I know that you have recently purchased 3 AEDs, those defibrillator machines, and I happen to know that because when I was PTA president at Hopkinson, those are they were $7,000 to $9,000, and then every 3 years it was $1,000 to update those. I hope that after 10 years of having those AEDs in place and no one has a heart attack in our parks and we don't use them, that we don't use that same use it or lose it rationale in keeping those AEDs. I remind you that the first goal listed in your mission is safety. Isn't the safety of our children important? I implore you to take Director Kahlert's no-nonsense foot down that we are going to keep the bike lanes because the safety of our children is a concern. Thank you.
Next we have, same issue, they're all the same after this. Jason Rusek, did I pronounce that correctly? Rosek.
resident here in Rossmoor for 8 years. My wife was basically born and raised here, so she's been here for 44 years. I live on Foster. I have parking restrictions in front of my house, and they are a pain in the butt. They are a nuisance and an inconvenience to my life. They're an inconvenience when I have visitors over to my house. It's an inconvenience when I have construction workers or people needing to come to my house to work, and they've got to move their vehicles halfway through the job. Nonetheless, in no means do I support removing the restrictions of parking on Foster. I would rather live with minor inconveniences in my life than to one day have to be faced with a statistic that we haven't really mentioned here, at least tonight, maybe have in the past, and that is injuries or something far worse to one of our children riding a bicycle to school. We as a community and as a neighborhood share a joint responsibility in assuring that safety, and I do not want to be for one bit responsible in having to look at those parents and say, I'm sorry that I wanted this bike restriction, this parking restriction lifted because it inconvenienced me. I ride to school every single day with my daughter and soon my 4-year-old next year. We will ride our bikes to school. We promote it to practically every family at our school, which is Weaver, to get them to ride to school. And sometimes we've had parents join us, hey, stop by, pick us up, we'll ride with you. And it weighs and it comes and it goes, and there's days when we get to the bike rack and there's maybe 3 or 4 bikes, and then there's days when there's like 10 or 15. And I'll be honest, when there's a lot of bikes, I'm like, woohoo, there's a little victory there. Hey, let's go. But we as residents here in Rossmoor need to make sure that we promote riding our bikes to school, because in a few years, I'm going to have to release the leash on my daughter and give her the freedom to ride her bike to school without her dad making sure she's looking both ways and watching out for everybody. And hopefully I've taught her that by the time she gets there. And that's going to be very difficult for me, knowing that the restrictions on Foster would be lifted and there'd be cars parking in that lane, because as DeMarco has mentioned, it would be useless. Because when there are cars parked in the bike lane and we have to weave in and out, it is a scary situation at times. While most drivers are very respectful, some aren't. And we have to weave out into the middle of traffic to get around that parked car. And to feel the pressure of that car trying to zip around us is uncomfortable and unsafe. And the people who do not ride their bikes to school, those children, it's because the parents feel that it is unsafe. And we need to do everything we can to make them feel that it is safe, and thereby reducing the traffic around our schools. And I think we can all agree that we want that. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Next up, Jen Ochoa. And did I pronounce that one right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Well, I am one of those parents. First, let me say good evening. And that I'm Jen Ochoa. I live on Martha Ann Lane. We've lived here 5 years. And I'm one of the parents who first heard about this through the survey. So most of my comments tonight were about keeping the bike lane. So don't have too much to say, but since I'm here, I'd just like to say that my daughter and her 5 friends ride their bikes in a little pack every day to school, weather permitting. My son, who is now at the high school, rode his bike to Oak all 3 years. And this same group of kids plans to do the same. We have classmates from the Highlands, the Dutch Haven, and CPE who also ride here. So any action in favor of removing these restrictions is a direct action against the safety of our neighborhood children and our district children. Like Mr. DeMarco was saying, if the bike lane is going to be a truly safe and viable means to and from school, the parking restrictions must be enforced. Violators will get the message once they start getting tickets there's no one out there ever giving tickets for those spaces. Thank you for your time, and I hope you'll vote in favor of our children.
Thank you. Next up, we have Branson Pollard. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Branson Pollard. Please keep the Rossmoor Bike Lane as it is. Removing the parking restrictions will add to the car traffic because even fewer children will bike to school because of the added danger of the bikes, having to swerve around the parked cars. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Aris Robanis. Welcome back.
Hi, my name is Aris Urbanis, and I go to LaSalle High School. Please keep the Rossmoor Bike Lane restrictions, as the bike lane has been in place since 1980. And the safety of even one child is worth keeping the bike lane restrictions in place.
Thank you. John Pollard.
My name is John Pollard, and I go to LaSalle High. I use the Rossmoor Bike Lane to go to and from school. I think you need to keep the bike restrictions because I use the bike lane every day, and it is safer for students to ride with the parking restriction so we don't have to swerve into traffic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean Wilson.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit based upon your comment that the bike lanes are not going away. But it also seems to me that based upon some of the conversation, or excuse me, the questions that were asked to some of the folks from the school district, that you might have lost perspective as to why the parking restrictions are there. I live in, I guess, what we call the affected area. I ride my bike at least 3 times a week in that bike lane, and what I do see is that cars particularly, or let me back up a second and say that, you know, there's a reason for those restrictions. If you were to go north of Hopkinson, northbound, the restrictions are not there. They are all on the southbound side. It's because of where I live. I'm a Hopkinson family. The bike lane is south to head for the kids in the morning. Then it swaps to where you move, cars can move over to the other side of the street, and then it's open on the north side so the kids can get home without having to swerve away. When I ride my bike, particularly down by Weaver School in the middle of the morning, there is a tremendous amount of cars, and I've been riding bikes now for about 40 years, and I think that I'm pretty good on a bike. I feel sorry for some of these kids that have to swerve around these cars, and in my opinion, who cares if only one kid uses that bike lane? It's for the safety of the kids, not the inconvenience. And I am extremely concerned with the efforts of the RHA to remove the restrictions on Foster. I am not sure how this voluntary organization can will themselves so much power in this community, yet we have a quasi-government, the RCSD, and yet the RHA act as though they have more power, or if it's one person that has taken it upon himself to join the RHA in order to fulfill his own agenda. When I was a part of the RCSD years ago, I can remember a gentleman, Ralph Bartabadian, coming to the meeting every single Tuesday night for the 8 years that I was on this board. And he complained about softball. And the reason he complained about softball was because the people were parking in front of his house. And I know that Mr. Kaler here came when he was president of the softball, and he had to speak almost every single Tuesday because Ralph wanted to do what he wanted to do, and that was protect himself. And I'm very disappointed that one individual can spark such a large change within this community and put our children at risk. Thank you.
It's not the name, it's the penmanship, sorry. Didn't want to throw Jim under the bus, but Jim.
Jim Hart, H-A-R-T.
Oh, that's an H. Okay, it looks like an A with another A and A-R. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hart.
I'm a lawyer, so my penmanship is horrible.
But thanks for coming.
Yeah, I live in the affected area. I don't have a tremendous amount to say. Everybody said everything I think that needs to be said. I do live on Foster in the affected area, and it is an inconvenience, but I think it's worthwhile. I think if we're going to be studying this, maybe we study expanding so that both sides are blocked off and cars can and kids can go up and down on both sides of the street. Because I think, whatever the study comes out and says, however many people are using the bike lane, I think the goal is probably to get more people to use the bike lane. So whatever it is, we should try and add to that, take cars off the street and get kids on their bikes. Thanks.
Thank you.